listening to MMA Think Tank with Jay and Mike.
Welcome to the MMA Think Tank. I'm your host, Jay, and along with me tonight, of course, is my co-host, Mike. But, Mike, why don't you let these guys know why you're on a cell phone?
Actually, Jay, I am on a landline plugged into the phone jack, an old-style phone, and because I have no power. I have no power because where I live, there's a thunderstorm, and luckily I was able to watch the whole fight card tonight for UFC 192, but then it started messing up during the scores and for the DC Gustafsson fight, and I didn't know what was going on, and then it just went off. My power went off, and but you know what, dude? We want to get this going out, the podcast going out, so this is how we're going to do it.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to roll with the punches, right? That's
right. I've got my iPhone here as well for some light, but it's going to go off pretty soon, so that's why that's why I'm on the old phone.
So, folks, he dug up the old rotary phone, and he decided to call in the podcast line, so it worked. So let's go with this, Mike. So we just got through with the fights basically about a half an hour ago. And, I wasn't too thrilled with these fights, and I know you weren't either, but why don't you let us know a little bit about how you really felt about them?
Just if you're talking about the fight card overall, I thought the Pena fight was, well, I'll just say that overall the fight card was not very good at all. I basically was thinking about, just going to sleep after this fight card because I felt that way because this wasn't excited. And then, of course, the main event really took off, and I got excited from there on. Yeah,
that's the point where I got excited. I was really wanting to fall asleep during this card. Even the Pena fight, it was a letdown for me. I was expecting her to run through Jessica, and that didn't happen. And for her to call out Ronda Rousey in the end was kind of odd to me. I don't know. That was just a bit off.
See, I agree with you there with the calling out Ronda Rousey. I think that's just something you probably shouldn't do right now, or that she shouldn't have done right then. I did think that she finally fought a ranked opponent, and that was something I talked about in another podcast, or it might have been on blab.im, that we're going to see really what happens when she fights a ranked opponent, and she did in Jessica Eye, and she got the win. It was a tough win, but it was a win, a dominant win based off the scorecards, and it was something that I agree. I thought she was probably going to finish the fight in the first or second round, but these are fights that's going to help her grow. But man, she should not have called out Ronda Rousey after that.
Yeah, so, the Pena-Jessica Eye fight, it was one of those fights that, when you're going into a fight that you're really pumped up for, you're behind somebody 100%, and then they don't perform quite as well as you'd hope. That's kind of the letdown I'm talking about. It's not that I think that she's terrible or anything. It's nothing like that. It's just that I was just hoping for something more, for a finish, and it didn't happen. But you're right. She fought a ranked opponent, and it's a little tougher now. It's just, it was a bit off-putting when she called out Ronda Rousey. I was like, what? It came out of nowhere. I'm like, you're not ready. You are definitely not ready.
Yeah, it was weird, how she was talking about how, I'm going to just, toe the line. I'm going to be PC, because evidently she's been, I guess, in interviews saying certain things, but I haven't come across anything that she's said that's been crazy.
Me neither.
Something that I thought was great, too, is that, just getting back one last thing dealing with, the kind of fight she kind of needs to have every so often. And don't get me wrong, everybody, it's always better to just, knock somebody out in the first round. But, she was in trouble a little bit there. She got out of a really tough side choke. So we saw her in adversity in her first time in the UFC, and she came through it. So it's interesting from here on to see what happens.
Yeah, definitely, and it's still somebody that I'm going to follow and support, and I'd like to see where she goes from here. But it's definitely not going to be Ronda Rousey next, folks. That just isn't going to happen. It's not in the cards, and it shouldn't be at this point. She's got a lot of moving up to do. So of course, Juliana Pena wins decision, unanimous, against Jessica Eye. What fight you want to talk about next? You know what? Let's get into the main event, because that was the fight that was really the great fight that stole the show.
Yeah, save the card.
Save the card. Yeah, not even stole the show. Save the card. You're right. Okay, so we had Daniel Cormier, of course, defending the belt against Gustafsson. Now, Alexander coming into this fight, Mike, there was still some question marks out there for me, just because, looking over his career and everything, we've talked about this before in the podcast. The guy has not fought the best guys out there that he's won over, and he's lost against the best guys out there. So there were still some looming question marks for me. I didn't know if he was the real deal. Tonight, he kind of proved that he was, but at the same time, I was really upset by him because for a tall fighter like him, I was expecting him to keep Daniel at bay, keep him away more with his legs and punches, his long reach advantage. Yet he did it by running away instead, and it was really infuriating.
Yeah, I kind of thought the same way, especially after a while. He's prone to do that. It's something that he does normally. He did it against John Jones, and to kind of piggyback off something you said, just a little bit ago, is that this is kind of like what he did with John Jones. He fought a close fight against a guy that most people thought he was going to lose to, and he came out, that type of fighter that people love. But even as I was watching the fight with Christy was like, why is he running? And Christy, she watches MMA with me. She watches the main event, so she's not a noob, as you would say, I guess. So she even thought that was kind of odd. It just looks bad on the scorecards. And Jay, what was the actual scorecards? I looked them up on my phone, but I don't know what round they gave Gustafsson.
I don't know either.
I personally thought it was 49-46. I could have went 48-47 for DC, but who got the 49-46? Do you remember?
I'm not sure. I just know that Daniel Cormier, in my opinion, won 49-46.
Okay, yeah, my power went out, and like I said, I had no. Well, it was starting to go out because my Dish Network was going all crazy, and I couldn't hear, but it got all pixelated. But I saw from the expressions and everything that that DC had won the fight. But
yeah, but the split decision.
You and I totally agree on the scorecard, man. I thought it was 49-46. I mean, octagon control almost the whole time in every single round. But I did give Gustafsson probably maybe the second round. I think.
The one round where he actually kneed him and hurt him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. See, up until that point, Daniel was winning that round, and that knee, it could have changed things. I don't know what's in the heads of these judges. All I know is that it definitely wasn't a situation where they should have called a split. I definitely saw Daniel winning this one. As for Gustafsson, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, sorry. I was not surprised. Well, I was kind of surprised it went to a split, and I was really happy that they gave it to DC because I really did not think it should have went to a split. But in these type of fights where you have close rounds, you just never know what's going to happen. And the close rounds I had was rounds 2 and 3. And I actually gave Gus, I think, it looks like the third round. Sorry, it's really dark in here, so I'm using all the light I can.
Yeah, it was the
I
third.
gave Gus round 3. Let's see. No, I didn't give him round 3. But it was close because of a takedown. Round 2 is what I gave it to him because it was a close on the feet and Gus got some takedowns. But Gus would take him down, but he would just DC would just get right back up. So
yeah. And that was really the story of this fight. It was just mainly him getting he got taken down a couple times. He jumped back up, and then it was just Alexander running away from Daniel's pushing forward. And, there's not much Daniel could do in that situation. He's a shorter guy. He's got to come forward. And as the champ, when you've got octagon control, you can't help but give it to the champ when the other guy's running away a lot, even though he's throwing these punches every now and then. Daniel was obviously the one throwing more punches. I think, the strikes that he threw was like twice as many as Alexander threw. But
and that's what happens when you're pursuing the fight.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean. And I thought that it's one of those things where Gustafsson's going to get some props for taking Daniel Cormier, another champ, to the cards in a close fight. But and I realize we can't judge off the crowd, who's winning the fight. But man, the boos were loud there, especially in rounds 4 and 5 for Gustafsson. Every time he would run away, I'll call it borderline running away. It's smart for him to move like that because he's a longer guy. He can get out of the way quicker. But man, the boos were coming down heavy.
Yeah, because at some points it was literally he turned around and ran, and it just didn't look good, But I get it. You're fighting a guy like DC that can knock you out with one punch. And DC, to see him slam Gustafsson in that first round the way he did was so classic of DC from Strikeforce days. It's the DC that not a lot of UFC fans have come to know and watch. What did you think about that slam?
When I saw the slam, I basically yelled something to the effect of, "I told these fools if he can slam Barnett, he can slam Gustafsson." And then I said something like, as much as I like you, Gus, you shouldn't be in this fight. You're coming in off, a loss. You're 1-2 your last 3 fights. And then I kind of settled back down because, look, when you pick up a guy as big as Gustafsson and as small as Daniel Cormier is, and you actually throw him over his head. I mean, it was just quite amazing. And from right then there, I thought, Jay, you and I are right. He's going to win this fight probably in the second or third. If he finishes it. But then as the fight went on, I thought to myself, okay, maybe this is going to go to the scorecards. And I thought to myself also at the end of the fight, I said, okay, if Gus was to win this fight, he was got to be on his bike and and stick and move. And that's what I thought if he was going to win the fight. That's what a lot of the pundits and analysts thought. And sure enough, if that didn't almost happen, and I'm glad it didn't.
Well, something I tweeted out after the fight was if Alexander Gustafsson would have actually used his kicks or used his legs by kicking instead of running away, he might have won this fight. He just didn't kick. He threw a few knees here and there, but where were the kicks? Where were the kicks we've known to see Alexander throw? I didn't see them tonight.
Yeah, my only guess is that he was kind of gun shy with the kicks because he didn't want to get taken down again by Daniel Cormier. But that leads me to
go ahead.
Daniel Cormier.
I was about to say.
Why did he not?
Go ahead.
Why did he not? Do more takedown attempts.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
and that's what I was complaining about. It was that it was obvious to Alexander and his corner that Daniel wasn't there to take him down. He was there to box, and the kicks were there all day. He was open for some nice head kicks. There were some opportunities there that were definitely missed by Alexander, and I think that they could have played a big role in this fight, and he could have possibly won it. And it was just that in combination with the running away just infuriated me at times. And not that I wanted Alexander to win necessarily. I really have no dog in this fight. I was saying that Cormier, he was my pick to win this fight just based on stats and watching these two fighters over the years. Right. But as far as, wanting somebody to win, I really had no dog in this fight. I wanted to see, a good fight here. And I think that if Alexander would have done that, he could possibly be the champ. So
if he would have let those legs go maybe in the 5th round, where he probably knew. Well, I knew that, Cormier wasn't going to try and take him down probably, especially, halfway through the last round, I would start throwing the kicks, see what happens. I kind of had a dog in this fight in so much as I picked Cormier to win, and I was very vocal about Gustafsson not getting the fight. I thought Bader should have got that fight. And, we can still talk about this fight if you want a little more, but that also goes to the Bader fight, which is I wanted Bader to win, but I picked Evans, and, it worked out that way, I guess, for Bader. Yeah.
No, we can jump into the Bader fight. I think there's not much more to say about the Cormier fight. He won. Yeah. He's the champ. Of course, that's until John Jones returns. We know he's going to return. We don't know when exactly, but he's going to return. And I have a, sneaky suspicion that he's going to get the belt back. What do you say? I mean,
oh yeah, I think that John Jones is going to, run the division again. I look at it so much.
I think Johnson has a puncher's chance.
What's that?
I think Rumble Johnson has a puncher's chance at getting the belt from John Jones.
Yeah, I think that he has a really good chance, a puncher's chance. But if he doesn't land that punch to John Jones, I think John Jones over time is going to wear him out.
Agreed.
Use his reach and all that stuff. But really, it's John Jones, and then after it's kind of like with Mighty Mouse. You know, you've got Mighty Mouse and you've got these other two guys in Joseph Benavidez and John Dodson. Those two guys are really good, but they're not going to beat Mighty Mouse, and that's how I feel about Johnson and Daniel Cormier with Jones.
Yeah, and getting it back into this Ryan Bader versus Rashad Evans fight, it was a pretty lackluster fight. I expected more out of Bader. I expected this Rashad to show up though. I called this. I said, we're going to see an older guy in there, possible ring rust, but we're looking at Rashad Evans that is at the tail end of his career, and it's about time to retire Rashad because it didn't look good for him.
Yeah, the way I looked at it was, I did pick Evans, but I picked Evans, but the Evans that showed up was the Evans that fought Nogueira, the Evans that didn't want to pull the trigger. And, one of the notes I have written down here for the fight is, let's see, this fight will not help Bader with the haters because he went to another decision. He didn't have the killer instinct, it looked like, when Rashad was busted up in the face. And I don't want to say he coasted, but, hey, look, a win's a win. He got 5
coasted.
wins in a row. I think he should fight the champ. I thought he should have already fought the champ, and I think he should fight the champ now. But, it's not helping Bader with all the haters and some of the fans.
You hit it right on the head, man. He coasted. I'll say it for you. Ryan Bader definitely coasted during this fight. Ryan Bader, he's the younger, stronger guy. I really thought that he would do more with this fight. When he got the takedown against Rashad early on, I thought, okay, here it is. We're going to see this strength, this guy, this more powerful guy. Yeah. But after that one takedown, it just seemed he coasted. And and then he started, to stick to the feet, and he was just punching, and it was just not a very good, exciting fight.
And that's what's funny is that was the reason I picked Evans to win this fight. Was because the Ryan Bader that showed up was the Ryan Bader I expected was going to show up, in that Evans would pull the trigger and land, and he didn't wrestle very much either. But that's my take on the fight. He's fighting. I assume he's fighting DC now, and I see DC beating him. Maybe he can take DC 5 rounds and eke out a decision, but I
don't think so. Yeah. With the way he looked tonight, I would definitely give it to DC. Bader, I thought going into this fight that he was going to come in, with that hunger, because he felt that he was wronged, and he was. It shouldn't have been Gustafsson there. It should have been him. And I thought he was going to go in there with something to prove, chip on his shoulder, and it wasn't any of the sort. He just coasted, and he eked out the win. He got a decision,
Yeah, and you talked about, Evans retiring. You think he should retire. I have a hard time telling these guys to retire, but my sense was, because, of course, we text, in between fights sometimes, is that it looked in his eyes that he wanted to retire, that, he's done it all. He was the champ. He won tough too. He was, hurt for a couple of years. There's not much he needs to do. And I really believe that if he lost to Ryan Bader, and please, this is not a knock on Ryan Bader. Ryan Bader, if you're listening to this, and maybe you are, who knows? This is not a knock on you, sir. But if Rashad Evans can't beat Ryan Bader, he can't win the championship again.
I agree.
And so if I was him personally, a young guy who's a fantastic analyst, a great personality, I personally would hang it up. And I think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer in the UFC. I really do. And, continue to train the guys at the Black Zillions camp and get the respect you deserve. If he wants to keep fighting, that's fine. But, I hope they give him the kind of, pick 'em fights that help these guys that once, Matt Hughes had that, Chuck Liddell kind of had that. These things where, like, you respect the champs, you respect the great guys that don't have it anymore. Even Nogueira to a extent was like that. But Nogueira, had a hard time with those guys.
Yeah. I agree with everything you said there. And moving on from this fight, because we know where Bader's going next. Rashad, it's up in the air. We don't know if he's going to retire or if he's going to move on and actually get one of these fights that,
Oh, yeah. And the one thing, I said, too, was about halfway through round 2, I said, can you see Rashad Evans putting on his analyst coat right now, because I really thought he was out of the fight in round 2. I really thought he was done. And that was just my way of saying he's done in the fight. He's getting ready to go back to the desk, you know. Yeah, he's ready to retire.
He was definitely doing a little bit of coasting himself.
Yeah. So,
you know, another fight that we watched that we both were disappointed with was Joseph Benavidez versus Ali Bagotinov. Okay. Bagotinov is the guy that, you know, last time he fought Johnson, he was popped for PED, and he's been out for a while since then. Come back, he's fighting Benavidez, and Benavidez seemed to not want to wrestle anymore and fall in love with his hands, and I think that's pretty much his downfall at this point. Well, and I know you agree. We've been talking about this. What else do you have to add to that?
Well, I would say that this was a showcase fight for Joseph Benavidez, but you know, he didn't look great in it. I mean, he got the win over, but I mean, look, Benavidez is the number 1 contender. He's ranked number 1 in the UFC. This is not my rankings. This is not your rankings. This is just the UFC. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
He's ranked number 1 in the UFC. Bagatinov is ranked number 14, and he couldn't finish him. Mm-hmm. And you know, he was one-dimensional. He just stood there and like he would push off. He would have a chance to take him down, but then he'd push him away to stand on his feet. And you know, Benavidez has power in his hands. He's knocked some guys out. I'm not saying he can't knock anybody out, but at some point you have to like at least attempt to take down and mix it up so you can get things to land. And I realize that I'm just a fat guy sitting on a couch and I don't do this for a living, but it just made sense to me that you've got to mix it up. Yeah,
no, I agree. Benavidez, you know, of course, we've been longtime fans of his and Team Alpha Male. These guys at Team Alpha Male just seem to, ever since Dwayne Bang Ludwig has come along, they seem to have fallen in love with their hands and not doing much wrestling anymore. As far as Benavidez is concerned, and TJ Dillashaw, of course. But here's the thing. TJ Dillashaw does it with such expertise that it makes sense for him to keep doing it. These other guys seem to just kind of want to emulate that, and they just don't have it. I'm sorry, Benavidez, but you need to stick to what you're good at, you know, mix it up. And that's what he's good at, you know.
Yeah, and this could be also possibly one of those times where, you know, you're not psyched up for a fight. Because let's you know, put the cards on the table. This guy is not going to fight for the championship probably, at least for another few more fights.
No.
And his last few wins have been by decision. And, you know, he's lost to Mighty Mouse twice. He's in like a holding pattern to like, you know, what do? You're not going to give him a contender to wipe out a contender because Benavidez is going to beat that contender. So I really think he could be, you know, not getting up for these fights, and because of that, and you know, and look, Bagatinov could have brought it as well. I don't want to say that, you know, that he's just a complete nobody, but there's a lot of variables here. But the bottom line is that, you know, I thought he should have fought a little more three-dimensional instead of one-dimensional. But maybe we'll see his next fight. Maybe he'll, you know, he heard the boos. He heard the boos post-fight, not like with Gus where they were booing in the 4th and 5th, and then he got cheers, you know, because the fight overall was a great fight. So we certainly shall see, and I'm kind of excited for the next Benavidez fight because, you know, I really want him to fight Mighty Mouse one last time, you know, but we'll certainly see if it happens.
Yeah, we will, and you know, that's the story of this card. It was basically these wrestlers that have fallen in love with their hands. You know, if you honestly think about it, almost this entire card was filled with wrestlers that were boxing tonight, and you heard the boos, and except for with the exception of the Cormier fight. He's a wrestler that was boxing, but you know, he made it interesting. And he kept pressing, and you know, it was a good fight. It was a good back and forth exchange, you know, most of the time. But these other guys, it was just bad. It was a poor outing, and it was just a card that really fell off the mark. I really wanted this one to hit a home run, and it just didn't. Fell flat.
Yeah, you know, UFC 191, I was pretty sure was going to deliver, and I thought it did, with the exception of the Frank Mir Frank Mir fight with Andrei Arlovsky.
Yeah.
I thought going into this one, you looked at the top 3 fights, and then you looked at Juliana Pena. She's coming in, and that's going to be a good fight. And then as soon as Hendricks had the problems with the weight cut and couldn't fight, that fell apart. Is like, okay, well, it's still a good card. It's still a solid card. So I'm still excited for it. But then, the Pena fight, as much as I, appreciated the type of fight she had to fight and her perseverance in it, it still was not the fight I was looking for. I know you weren't looking for that fight either. And then the Joseph Benavidez fight was the one that basically came into the main card from the prelims. That didn't pan out. And, let's just go ahead, if you don't mind, just quickly run over the Ruslan Magomedov and Sean Jordan fight. I try and keep things professional here, even though I'm not getting paid to do this. But every so often, you just got to be a fan. And I pretty much just wrote down the scores, and I wrote crap fight.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Well, you remember we texted each other during in between a round, and we both said it at the same time. We both mentioned that it was very reminiscent of the Mir Arlovsky fight. It was just that boring and that dull for a heavyweight fight. I don't know what it was doing on the main card, to be quite honest. I'm puzzled by that. I know Magomedov is he's 3-0 in the octagon right now, so I think maybe they were trying to showcase him. And the guy's got some pretty fast kicks that he did show at the very end of the fight, which I thought was pretty weird, because if he would have thrown those at the beginning of the fight, it might have made it a bit more exciting for me to watch. But, first and second rounds and most of the third, it was just absolutely boring. These two were just, I don't know, they were fighting, but it was nothing you could write home about. It's like you got two guys in there that are just winging punches and just doing it very sloppily. I honestly felt like I was watching a King of the Cage match. Yeah,
well said. It's the one fight I think we just started texting, without a lot during, because it was just so boring and nothing was really happening. But to answer your question though of why the fight was on the card, Sean Jordan's got 3 wins in a row with a couple of knockouts. So the heavyweight division is there's people in the heavyweight division, but the heavyweight division in MMA. Even in the UFC is not very good. So if you get 3 fights in a row with a couple of knockouts, you're that might be why he's there. As for Ruslan Magomedov, there's a little bit of DC is fighting, and Kane's a big draw, and so is Luke Rockhold. He's fighting soon, and Magomedov is from their camp. So I think there might have been a little bit of that as well. Throw him on the card and see what happens.
Yeah,
that's just my guess.
And I think you're right with that. It is to showcase these heavyweights. They want to get these names out there more, so you guys know, hey, that we don't just have 4 heavyweights in the division. Because as it stands, it seems like we get the same ones rotated all the time fighting the champ in that division.
That's something even that that I texted. Well, I didn't text that exactly, but I texted there's 3 really good heavyweights in the division. There's about 5 good heavyweights. And then after that, they're not that great. And a lot of the guys, to add to what we talked about, to add is that a lot of these guys are getting older. Barnett's getting older. Big Country's getting older. Heck, Nogueira retired. The division's getting older. Lorenzo Hood is the one that brought up on the interview that when we interviewed him a while back that the UFC is trying to basically recycle heavyweights and round robin them. But look, if you're doing that in the UFC, that tells you that the whole of MMA is even worse. So
yeah, I agree. Before we wrap up this UFC 192, I just want to touch on a preliminary bout between Sage Northcutt and Francisco Trevino. Sage Northcutt, of course, 19-year-old kid coming into the UFC. I say kid because he's less than half my age. So
could be your son.
He very well could be. I have a son that's older. So anyway, so Sage Northcutt's there, and he fights this guy in Francisco Trevino, who was 12-1 coming into the octagon to make his debut. Or was this his debut, Trevino? I think. Yeah,
I believe it was.
Yeah.
The thing that was kind of paired them together is they were both from Legacy fights. They both came from Legacy fights at the same time, basically.
Yeah. Now, I don't know too much about this kid, Sage Northcutt, but I will say that despite his goofiness, and I say that with all due respect, Sage, I think you're a clean-cut, wholesome, good kid that you seem like it anyway, and I think you'd be great for a role model for kids in the sport, and it's good to have people like that there. But I will say that what he displayed, I don't want to overstate this, but Sage displayed some really great technique, some really fast, lightning quick, strikes, and a killer instinct that, we don't see all the time. So especially with a guy coming into the UFC first, debut in the octagon, you don't see that from these people. Sometimes they kind of, they get caught up in the whole thing, and he didn't get caught up in the moment at all. He jumped in there and rained down them punches. What did you think about it?
Yeah, he came in 5-0 out of Legacy fights, fighting a guy who's 12-1, and he's fighting an opponent that has more than half the fights that he has, and he obliterated him.
Yeah,
and that's what's really important to me is that the guy had more fights. This is a prelim fight, so this is not even. They did televise it, but it was originally on the Fight Pass prelim, so it wasn't supposed to air originally. But the fight was so short and so amazing, they decided to pop it onto the televised prelims. And I agree with everything you said there. I just think he's a guy to watch for sure. See how he comes along. I watched him in Legacy. He was amazing there. I posted a highlight video of him. And the guy his movement, I realize he's a lightweight, but his movement is just so on point. The way he switches stances, he's got that karate stance.
And I was going to say he fights a lot like a Machida and Uriah Hall mixed. He's just got a little bit more quickness, I would say. It's that young blood, It's because his youth, I think, but he's got that fast twitch movement. And that, like you said, that karate stance. It's just really exciting to see somebody like this, and you're right, somebody to follow. And I look forward to his next fight. I would just give one word of advice: less flips in the octagon. If you win and do one flip, that's fine. But every time the camera goes to you, you don't have to flip.
I think Wonderboy Thompson was probably giving him a call tonight, saying, "Hey, buddy, act like you've been there. You just one flip is fine." But I give him a pass because like I said, I've watched him in Legacy fights. I mean, I've got I've got the highest tier of cable before you get HBO, and so I watched a lot of the your Legacies and not Ring of Combats, but Resurrection Fighting and all that stuff like that. And this guy, he really is a kid. He's just having fun. Yeah. And I think he was just playing to the cameras, and I doubt he'll do that again. But he's just having fun in there, and it's going to be interesting, similar to what happened with Juliana Pena. What happens when he really gets into it? When he's got a guy in front of him that, and I realize just this whole discussion going past this fight is
exactly.
I won't say it's ludicrous, but and I realize I brought it up, but we'll see what happens next. But I'm excited to see what happens when he really gets into like guys who are in the top 15, guys that are on Fight Pass, not on Fight Pass, but are in prelims televised.
It's not as ludicrous as you think, because you're looking at somebody that looks like he has all the potential in the world. I mean, he looks fantastic right now, and I realize he's not fighting that level of competition yet, but he definitely looks like one of those guys that will eventually fight that kind of competition. And he's only 19. He's 19.
Oh, I completely agree. I don't see him losing any time in his next 2 or 3 fights. And I realize I don't know what is going to come after those next 2 or 3 fights. And I know this guy is young, and he's just there. He's just come onto the scene in the UFC.
Yeah.
But he reminds me of Benson Henderson. I caught Benson Henderson on the the Access TV shows. He was fighting on MFC, a show out of Canada, and then he came into the WEC and he destroyed a lot of the guys in the WEC. And this is the guy I've seen since Benson Henderson that I've been with from the beginning. And it's what's really funny is he comes out to Awesome God just like Vincent Henderson does.
That's funny.
So I don't know if that's just a funny coincidence or what, but I mean this guy's got big things coming.
Or he's just a Christian. That's all.
Well, no, I realize that. But,
yeah, no, I know.
I watched Benson Henderson from the beginning on Axis. I watched Sage in the beginning on Axis. They come into the Sage, into the same music. And they're dominating the UFC.
I was there with you with Benson, brother.
Oh yeah, for sure. No, just like you turned me on to Uriah Faber, brother. I turned you on to Benson.
Yeah,
so.
and then we had WEC and we had Carlos Condit and all those guys. Just a wonderful, wonderful organization. The WEC.
How many of those guys have held a title or are fighting for a title?
Oh man. There's more than a handful, that's for sure. And you remember back in the day,
the UFC, remember?
And you remember back in the day when we used to tout the WEC, everybody used to poo-poo us and say, "Oh, they're not as good as the UFC guys. They're nobody."
Yeah, they'd be in the UFC if they were good.
Exactly. So, you know what? It could happen with any organization. And speaking of that, that's a good transition into World Series of Fighting, Mike. What's coming up with World Series of Fighting?
Yeah, in 2 weeks from now, it'll be the 17th. It's going to be World Series of Fighting 24, and I'm pretty sure we'll be doing a podcast after that. It'll be 2 weeks for another podcast.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good card with a lot of big names. I don't know how exciting it's going to be, but the main event is Yushin Okami versus John Fitch. Let's be honest, those guys are great fighters, but they're kind of boring. But whoever wins that fight will end up fighting Jake Shields for the welterweight championship of the WSOF because they stripped Usman Alharis, and and I really thought Shields was winning that fight anyway before he was being raked in the eyes and all that stuff. So I'm very happy that they decided to give Shields the a shot at the vacant belt.
Yeah.
Yushin Okami, John Fitch, the winner there fights Jake Shields. The return of Nick Newell, really pumped about that. Nick Newell, his biggest claim to fame is that his forearm is missing on one of his hands. But that does not, does not mess with him at all. He's still a great striker, and he uses that kind of messed up arm to land really good submissions as well. And just to finish out the card, we've got Matt Hamill versus Vinny Margulies. That's a wrestler versus a jiu-jitsu guy.
Matt Hamill's still around, huh?
What's that?
Matt Hamill's still around, huh?
Yeah, I worry about Matt Hamill. I saw Matt Hamill at Tough 3. The first Tough I ever watched was Tough 3, and I was a fan of his basically because the guy was a tough-nosed fighter. He dealt with his deafness really well in the cage, but I really think he probably doesn't have any money, and he's coming back for these fights to make some money. That's really what I think. I've heard, years ago, and I'm saying years ago, we're talking like 5 years ago, that's why he came back to the UFC and then got smashed by. I don't remember who the fighter was, but the fighter smashed him. Well, now he's coming back fighting Vinny Margulies. And the last two fights are two title fights, actually, and that's Blagoy Ivanov versus Derek Memon for the heavyweight title, and Donovan Frilo versus Magomed Bibliotov for the inaugural flyweight title. Those title fights, I don't know any of those guys. I'm going to be honest, and my guess is that 99% of the people out there listening don't know them either. So at least it's giving us something to watch to see who to look at in those divisions. But what do you think about Yushin Okami, John Fitch? Who do you think wins that fight? Because Yushin Okami's fighting at welterweight.
If I had to pick, I would say John Fitch by lay and pray. And I'm being honest. I think that Yushin Okami just, like you said, not only is he boring, but I just don't think he's that great of a fighter. I think John Fitch has more technicality. I think he's better as a fighter per se, but he's boring too. So, he wins fights based on decisions, and he doesn't have that killer instinct or try to finish fights. So I see this going the distance and him winning, and then him fighting for the belt. And I think that he takes the belt from. Or not takes the belt, but he wins the belt against what's his name?
Jake Shields.
Jake Shields. Yeah. I just don't think that. I think you got two technical fighters there in Jake Shields and John Fitch, but I think John Fitch has the edge over Jake Shields. I think he's better technically.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be. I will agree with you that I think John Fitch is going to win this fight. The only thing Okami has, I think, is strength over John Fitch. But John Fitch, he's moved guys around, like you said, lay and pray and all that stuff like that. So he's not a weakling by any stretch. But that's all Yusha Okami has, in my opinion, is the strength. When it comes to John Fitch, though, versus Jake Shields, I'm going to go with Shields because, to me, Jake Shields has looked a lot better lately in the World Series of Fighting than John Fitch. Now, I by no means think that this is a lock for Jake Shields. But, man, what he did to Paul Harris, Paul Harris is a strong dude. And he was winning most of that fight until the very end. And he put up with so much, cheating by Paul Harris that I'm gonna lean towards Shields on that one. But really, I mean, there's
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think that again is a case of somebody like Paul Harris that has more strength and technique. He's got great leg locks and things like that, but I think he's more just a brute, and Yushin Okami is a guy with more strength. But I think technique beats strength 9 times out of 10. So that's why I would go ahead and pick Fitch over Yushin, and I would think that I think that Fitch has a little bit more technique than Shields. But it's up in the air. That fight really, honestly,
they're both really good at basically positioning.
Yeah,
Jake Shields gets on top of you. It's not lights out, but it's here comes another Jake Shields win that no one's happy about.
So it's basically who gets on top to lay and pray first.
Right.
That's what we're going to see.
Nick Newell, and I guess there's really not much more to talk about. But what are your thoughts on Nick Newell versus Tom Marcelino?
Well, I don't know Tom Marcelino, but Nick Newell, great fighter, very inspirational fighter. It's good to see somebody out there doing things like this that you wouldn't normally see doing, especially since he only has one full arm, the other arm cut off right there at the forearm. I believe it was a birth defect. It was just how he was born. And he's dealt with this all his life, and he does a great job at utilizing what he has in the game. And it's good to see him come back.
Yeah, and I believe he was undefeated. He's another guy I watched.
Yeah, until Justin Gagey beat him. I think that's.
I was going to say that. Is that basically he was undefeated, and then he lost to Justin Gagey, and he won his last fight coming off the loss. So he's one of those guys that that is a guy to watch, and not just because of the disability. And I realize you're not saying that he's great just because of that either.
No.
But he's a guy that division is a lot better because he's there, and he's helping the WSOF grow. And I like his attitude. I like the way he fights. I mean, even when he lost to Gagey, he kept coming, even though he was getting picked apart by Gagey. Because basically in that fight, Justin Gagey is already a pretty good striker, but he's more of a brawler. But after I think the second round, he found out how to pick him apart.
Yeah, he did,
and finished it. I think I forget when he finished it, but he did finish it.
Yeah, I remember watching that fight and feeling kind of sad because I was pulling for Nick Newell, but Gagey, he brought it and showed what a great fighter he is, and I still say that Gagey could come to the UFC and have a run there. He's a great fighter. So, but yeah, Nick Newell, I can't wait to see him again. So excited for it.
Yeah, before we forget, and I know there's not a lot of stuff to still talk about, but fighter of the month. What do you want me to go first? You want to go? What do you want to do?
Well, you know what? You go first on your fighter of the month, Mike.
Yeah, my fighter of the month was usually it's a little easier the last few months. You kind of look and see who's fighting, over the month, and that this person probably deserves it or whatever, or that person, it's usually cut and dry. This one was a little tougher for me, though. I'm not going to lie, and it has nothing to do with things outside the cage, like a few of mine have been, but it does have something to do with, again, filling in for fights. So I did not pick Mighty Mouse. I did not pick Phil Davis, even though he won the 205 tournament. I picked Uriah Hall as my fighter of the month.
Nice.
Because he had 2 wins and he filled in for to fight Mousasi, and he KO'd Mousasi with, and I believe I picked that fight to win. No, Jay, I believe you picked that fight.
Yeah, I picked that fight to win, and I called it.
I did get the. I'm going to be honest with you. When who was it? When you picked LC Davis over Joe Warren, I was thinking, well, I don't know what he's talking about there, and I got that right.
Yeah.
But man, if you didn't get this one right, this time.
yeah. I just kind of figured that would happen, but that's awesome that you picked him for your fighter of the month. For me, I actually went Mighty Mouse.
You did, yeah.
Yeah. You know what? He's cleaned out his division. There's nobody that can touch him in that division. I'm confident in saying that. And from this point on, I honestly think that he should move up.
Yeah, it looks like he only wants to move up if they pay him like the big fights. And I would like to see him move up. I certainly agree.
I agree with that, though. I agree with that. You know why? Because they paid Silva to move up, for the big fights. And these fighters that have shown that they're pound for pound some of the best fighters out there, you pay them for these super fights. You pay them to go up or down in weight, Definitely. I think he should get the big bucks for this.
He wanted $1 million to fight TJ Dillashaw. Whether he's worth that or not, I don't know. But he has said repeatedly, unless I get the money to do this, I'm fine hanging out in my division and beating all comers. And to me, that's something as much as I want to see these guys, go up. Like, for instance, somebody like Conor McGregor, I think it's not. If he beats Aldo, I wouldn't say that he should go up. No,
because he's got a lot to prove still.
That, but I'm leading up to something though. With someone like Mighty Mouse, who's cleaned out the division.
Yeah.
I mean, how many fights has he got at flyweight? I don't know, 10. And, this is a time to go ahead and do it. But there is something about a guy like a George St. Pierre, that, or even let's say Anderson Silva for so long. He just destroys all comers.
Yeah.
And, even though it's a foregone conclusion, it's amazing that someone could hold the belt for like 6 years. So I kind of waver back and forth, but man, that Dillashaw fight would be great.
No. And don't get me wrong. It's up to the champ, okay, whether or not he moves up or not. He doesn't have to move up. I would just like to see him move up because I think he could do well at 135. Very well. I think he could fight for the belt. Eventually. Do I think that he should move up and get, a shot at the belt automatically? No, of course not. I think he should have at least a fight, maybe two, couple of fights, and then go for the belt. But he could jump right in there in the mix with the top 5, no problem.
What do you think about if he was to fight Uriah Faber and then if he beats Uriah Faber, then he fights Dillashaw?
I don't think it's a question if he beats Uriah Faber. It's he would beat Uriah Faber, and not because look, I like Uriah Faber. He's a great guy, great fighter. I just think that he's too slow for somebody like Johnson, and we've seen Faber fight Cruz, and we've seen how that turned out. I think it'd be much of the same in this fight, maybe even worse, because Johnson's faster than Cruz. Johnson's.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't expecting to argue the fight on who would win the fight.
No, we don't have to argue it, but.
I mean, I would say that's a little bit different though, if we're talking about that, because Mighty Mouse is much more smaller than Cruz was, so I think Faber would have size on him. Now, I would pick Mighty Mouse to win that fight.
Yeah,
don't get me wrong, I would. But I think it would be a different fight.
I don't know. I don't necessarily
think. That's why I think if he was to fight Faber and win, I would understand if they decided to give him a title shot.
Faber couldn't get his hands on Cruz. You know what I'm saying? He was too fast for him. And
so he knocked him down a couple of times. I mean, it was a good fight. It's just that at the end of the fight, I knew that Cruz won that fight.
Yeah, I think it would go that same route. But regardless of that, or who would win the belt if he fought Dillashaw, because I think Dillashaw is one of the best fighters pound for pound as well. He's an amazing anomaly. But as far as that fight goes, yeah, I would love to see that fight. I would love to see them both get $1 million and have that fight happen. But yeah, I picked him for fighter of the month just basically because he is, for me, pound for pound, the best fighter out there. And Johnson he's cleaned out his division, and he looked fantastic against John Dodson, his last fight last month. So that's why I picked him.
Well, yeah, it was in my top 3 picking for Fight of the Month. So I certainly agree with your pick there. Something I wanted to add too about Uriah Hall. Something that I did not say was, and that's again part of not having all my stuff around me to look at with the power out and everything, is that Uriah Hall's fight. He's taking Bisping's spot in fighting Robert Whittaker. So it's not just the fact that he's fought twice and filled in to fight Mousasi and beat Mousasi. He's filling in again, and he's going to fight Whittaker. And I really looking forward to that fight. I think he's going to beat Whittaker, and he's going to move on to the top 5, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been saying this. You're preaching to the choir, man. I've been saying this for the past month. I've been saying Uriah Hall. This guy's going to emerge here. He's going to, get in where he belongs among the elite in the UFC in this division. And, after he beat Mousasi, he's proved that he belongs here. Now he's got to solidify that by beating Whittaker. And I know Whittaker's not ranked high or anything, but I think after this, you got to give him something like Machida or Kennedy, somebody, you got to give him a top 5, top 6.
Yeah, I agree, and I don't know. I really still don't know what happens, because as much as I thought that Gegard was going to win that fight, and he almost proved me right with that first round, and proved a lot. A lot of us thought, there you go, this is what we thought was going to happen. We'll see when he fights another guy, and I hope they're not moving him too fast. I know that sounds weird because he just came off the show maybe like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I don't think it's too fast.
We'll see what happens. I think they should move him fast. I don't like coddling fighters who are already like making a name and already doing well. If you got people like, for instance, we talked about Sage Northcutt. I can understand that. He's got 5 fights. You kind of like bring him along slowly. I understand why a promotion would do that. Paige Van Zandt is another one. I certainly understand that. Again, she had like 6 fights or something like that. But with a guy like Uriah Hall, who looked fantastic on the show, then he lost to Kelvin Gastelum and he lost to John Howard. But now those are behind him, and we'll see what happens from there.
Well, we all know that it's been a mental thing with him in the octagon, and that seems to have subsided now, and he seems to get in there and be mentally game, and physically, of course, he's been amazing. But just fighting some guy like Machida next, I think, would be fantastic, because they both fight similar styles, and it would be an exciting fight and very, very good for him if he were to beat somebody like Machida, because Machida's a big name. Everybody knows Machida, and I just think that'd be a perfect fight.
I like the excitement value of the fight. The only problem I may have is that Machida's been on such a downturn. It might be like, they might say, well, he beat Machida also, but, they even said it about Mousasi right now. These people who are backpedaling, look, I'm not going to backpedal about my pick on Mousasi, but there's a lot of backpedalers now. Well, Mousasi, really, if you look at his record, in the UFC, well, you know what? When you picked Mousasi, you knew that, because I knew that, and I still picked Mousasi. So we have to look at, I think we have to look at Machida's record in his last 4 fights, and it's not that great. So if, as much as I want that fight and watch it to be an exciting fight, who knows what that does for Hall. Well, you could be right. It could be something that he does need, because, look, one name is Lucky, and a lot of people called that kick lucky, and I'm not one of them. If you watch the post-fight, he said, I knew he was going to go for the leg again or shoot in, so I timed it perfectly, and I agree that was not a lucky kick. So, look, if he beats Machida, like you said, those are two big names now. Well, and you can't discount that.
Yeah, and even if Machida is actually on the downward spiral, he's not. He's towards the end of his career. It doesn't matter. He's still ranked, I think, 5 or 6, depending on which ones you look at the rankings. And he also has that big name. And regardless of where he stands at this point, because let's face it, he's not standing at the point where he's like a butterbean or somebody. He's actually still viable, and he's still very dangerous. If Uriah Hall got a win over him, it would be huge for him, huge, and people would really start to take notice. And I think they already have after the Mousasi win. Most people that I know and that I've read on various sites and everything, they all picked Mousasi to beat Hall. So I was one of the few that picked Hall. So we'll see what happens with Hall and his future, but it looks good with him coming back right away, and it's pretty exciting. So I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, and I think that if he beats a guy like Machida, I think he could then either fight for the title or get one more fight and then fight for the title. But that top 3-4 in the middleweight division, man,
they're tough.
Is rough, man.
Yep.
Weidman, Rockhold, Jacare. I mean,
yeah, even Jacare.
And Romero was very tough as well, but I think he's one of those guys who's kind of not on the level of those other three guys.
I was going to say, I think he definitely has a shot against Romero. The other guys, though, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. But I still think that Hall, mentally sound, can get in there and mix it up with all three of those guys at the top. Do I say he wins or beats them? Not necessarily. Maybe. He's got those lightning fast kicks. It could happen. But yeah, you mentioned Rockhold, Jacare. These guys are beasts, Weidman, come on. I mean, it's
I'm a
crazy.
Weidman guy, man. I love me some Chris Weidman. But, we're playing what I like to call MMA chess. I talk to my buddy at work, and I call it MMA chess because we're thinking so many moves ahead. We got to figure out what's in front of him and go from there. But man, it's exciting to watch. And I think the reason we may be talking more about this is because this night's card was not very good.
Yeah, so true, so true. And the connection and everything hasn't been very good tonight with the phone and not using the Skype, and it's just not as good as it usually is. So production value on tonight's show is going to be kind of low. But you know what? Yeah. We're going to get something out there because we've already put it out there that we were going to get it out there tonight. So Here it is. So anyway, but Mike, we're going to have to wrap up the show here. I got to get going. But anyway, everyone, thanks for listening. You can always find us on Facebook at MMA Think Tank. You can reach us at mmathinktank@gmail.com. You can go ahead and reach out to us. Let us know what you think, Fighter of the Month, or the fight card that we watched, or future fight cards. Let us know. Or if you want to let us know an opinion on the podcast, you can tell us some things about that. And we could either change some things or just listen to what you have to say and take it. Even if it's bad, it's all good.
Yeah, as soon as the power comes back on here, I'll jump on Facebook and put some stuff out there.
And Mike's always constantly putting up stuff on Facebook. He's writing great little articles and stuff on MMA news and stuff, and it's pretty fantastic to read. You do a great job on that, Mike. So kudos to you, man.
I love to write, man. So this is giving me an outlet to do it. Our discussions, everything we talk about, it goes in there. And when I have free time, I'm trying to figure out something to write about.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's all I wanted to put out there tonight. So, again, thanks for listening, guys. And Mike, thank you for coming through on the phone and being able to get on tonight.
Yeah, 2 weeks from now, we'll do another podcast, huh?
All right, man.
All right, brother.
Talk to you soon.
Got it.